Hi everyone, this is my run on Centaurion's Reign Lufenia stage, which is the debut of the level 80 crystal cap in DFFOO Global. And to make things interesting, this is a duo run of Lightning and Kurasame. As always, I will be including a timestamp in the video description that you can use to skip ahead to the section that you are interested in. Okay, so coming to the overview of the fight and the fight mechanics, this fight itself can be very tricky and confusing, and I thought it's best explained through the use of a couple of slides. So you really need to understand the mechanics surrounding the Lufenia orb of both the Centaurion blade and the Tyrant monster in order to be very successful in this fight, because most of the challenge comes from the Lufenia orb appearing and disappearing, and understanding the mechanics will allow you to time the appearance and disappearance of the orb to your advantage. So I'll start off with the fight by giving an overview of the Centaurion blade and the Tyrant monster, as well as the various phases of the fight. So starting off with the Centaurion blade, it appears from the start of the fight as a companion to the Tyrant boss, and anytime a Centaurion blade appears, it always starts off immediately with a Lufenia orb at a count of 5. The unique thing about the blade's Lufenia orb is that the orb will tick down by 1 when the blade takes an action, and there is nothing else that will decrease or increase the orb counter. This also means that the orb will tick down to 0 and will trigger after the Centaurion blade takes 5 actions. Essentially, if the orb ticks down to 0 and triggers, it's a game over. Even if you can somehow survive the attack, you'll be put at a severe disadvantage because all your buffs will be dispelled. That is very difficult to really continue on the fight. In addition, although it's not stated in the in-game description, the Centaurion blade actually has an innate resistance to delay effects. So using attacks such as Christis' Degenerator Whip or General Leo's Master Blade will not actually delay the Centaurion blade. You can still use breaks to delay the Centaurion blade as per usual break mechanic, and very interestingly, you can still use Lion to delete the turns of Centaurion blade, since turn deletion is technically different from turn delay. So the strategy surrounding Centaurion blade is essentially to kill it off before it takes 5 turns and the orb counter reaches 0. However, it's not as straightforward as that. You also actually want to keep the Centaurion blade alive for as long as possible, because the Centaurion blade dying also triggers the appearance of the Lufenia orb on the Tyrant boss itself. So the longer you can keep the Centaurion blade around, the longer you can delay the appearance of the Lufenia orb on the Tyrant boss. This also means that as far as possible, you want to kill off the Centaurion blade when its orb counter reaches 1 right before it takes a turn. Coming to the Tyrant boss itself, it has a recast ability which is just a group AoE brave attack. However, you do not want this to break you, because if it breaks you, it will be followed up by Pulse Fire, which is a group brave and HP attack that also dispels all your buffs, so which is very similar to most Lufenia orb trigger attacks that we see. If a Lufenia orb is triggered on the Tyrant, which comes from the death of the Centaurion blade, when a Lufenia orb appears on a Tyrant, it will automatically cleanse all debuffs, and it will actually gain an innate debuff immunity, which makes the Tyrant much more difficult to deal with. The Lufenia orb if it is present, will disappear when the Tyrant resummons the Centaurion blade at 69% or below, assuming the first Centaurion blade has been killed off. At 39% health or below, if there are no Centaurion blades on the field, meaning that you've killed either the first or the second Centaurion blade, the Tyrant monster will resummon the Centaurion blade, and this will also trigger its Lufenia orb. And of course, the blade it summons will come with the 5-turn Lufenia orb as well. If this happens, you need to quickly burst down the Tyrant to 0% health to end the fight, because there is nothing else that will remove the Lufenia orb on both the Tyrant and the Centaurion blade at this point of the fight. You do, however, need to note that the Centaurion blade will not be summoned, and the Tyrant will not trigger the appearance of its Lufenia orb if the previous Centaurion blade is still alive. So meaning, once the Tyrant reaches 39% HP threshold and below, if the Centaurion blade from previously is still around, nothing will change. The Tyrant will not have an orb, and you can then continue to damage down the Tyrant. However, at any time below the 39% HP threshold, if the Centaurion blade dies, it will trigger resummoning of the third and final Centaurion blade, and as mentioned, will then trigger the appearance of the Lufenia orb on the Tyrant monster. So what does this mean? Knowing these mechanics, you can try to maximize your damage on the Tyrant while keeping the appearance of the Lufenia orb on the Tyrant for as little time as possible. And the key to this fight lies on two characters really. One is of course Lightning, being the featured character, and in fact if you have Lightning with just her LD, you can permanently delay the Tyrant just with Lightning alone, and the Tyrant will never get a turn, which also means that the Tyrant will never get to use his recast ability. The Tyrant is not immune to delay effects, which is different from the Centaurion blade, and that's why the delay from Lightning's army of 1+ works nicely for the Tyrant monster. The second unit that works really well is Centaurion in this fight, mainly because Centaurion can delete the turns of the Centaurion blade, and by doing so will keep the orb count on the Centaurion blade relatively high because it is not able to get a turn. And this also means that you do not need to kill off the Centaurion blade, and keeping it alive for longer means that you are delaying the appearance of the Lufenia orb on the Tyrant boss. These two characters, Lightning and Centaurion, will make the fight significantly easier, but it is certainly possible to complete the fight without the use of either of these two units. So coming to the three phases of the fight. Firstly, the first phase starts at the start of the fight, which is Tyrant at 100% of the health, and will last until the Tyrant's at 69% health. The first phase is pretty straightforward. You want to focus damage on the Tyrant while keeping the Centaurion blade alive for as long as possible. Eventually the Centaurion blade will die, mainly due to splash and AoE HP damage. And of course you really do want to kill the Centaurion blade when it reaches a Lufenia orb count of 1. Hopefully at the point that you kill off the Centaurion blade, the Tyrant is very close to 69% health. At which point of course the Lufenia orb will appear, but at that point if you just manage to bring Tyrant to 69% health, it will trigger the start of phase 2 and the Lufenia orb and Tyrant will disappear. Phase 2 of the fight is the Tyrant at 39 to 69% health. At this point, if the first Centaurion blade is dead, the Tyrant will resummon a fresh Centaurion blade with a count of 5. At this point in time, if you haven't killed the original Centaurion blade, you should kill the original Centaurion blade, but again preferably when it's at a count of 1. You want to continue to focus your damage on Tyrant at this stage of the game, but very importantly, you really want to try to keep the Centaurion blade alive for as long as possible here. Phase 2 is also the phase where if you have a Centaurion friend support, or if you are using a Centaurion in your party, to focus all the turn deletion on the Centaurion blade, while the rest of your party focus damage on Tyrant. The aim of the game is to try to enter phase 3, which is Tyrant at below 39% health, while the Centaurion blade from phase 2 is still alive. So coming down to phase 3, which is Tyrant at 39% health or below, at this stage of the game, you want to again continue focus damage on Tyrant, but at this stage of the game, the fight gets increasingly dangerous. So this is really the best time to use your summon or burst mode. If the Centaurion blade from the previous phase dies, Tyrant will summon a new Centaurion blade and will also trigger its own Lufenia orb. So that's why if you manage to keep the Centaurion blade from phase 2 alive to this point, Tyrant will actually not summon a new blade, and you then don't have to deal with the Lufenia orb on a Tyrant monster. In fact, if you use lightning with her LD at a minimum, you can kill off Tyrant without killing off the original Centaurion blade at the start of the fight. And this is especially easier if you pair lightning off with Amidate Lion. Okay, with that said, let's move into the fight. See you there. Okay, so coming to the fight, lightning really makes the fight very easy. And the friend support unit I use is Amidate Lion for the very valuable turn deletion here. The reason I brought Kurasame as the partner to lightning is mainly due to Kurasame's frame debuff, which at 5 stacks will increase HP damage dealt to the target by 30%. And because lightning can indefinitely delay Tyrant, this also means that the 5 stacks of the frame debuff on Tyrant will never go away. The HP damage increase from Kurasame's debuff also stacks very nicely with the HP damage increase buff from Lufenia's LD skill. So this way, any HP damage that lightning deals is very significantly increased, and for most of the time will be hitting Tyrant for 80 to 90,000 HP damage. So starting on the first phase, which is Tyrant at 69 to 39% health, I'm focusing damage on Tyrant with the lightning, and on Kurasame's first turn I used his LD mainly to immediately bring Tyrant to 5 stacks of the frame debuff. For the Lufenia orb on the Centaurion blade, I mainly use the Centaurion blade to break with lightning so that I can get extra free turns with lightning, and lightning will then also keep the Centaurion blade broken so that the blade doesn't do any HP attacks. But otherwise, as you can see, I'm reverting my target to Tyrant after that. So in other words, for the Centaurion blade, just keep him broken either with Kurasame's S2 or break it with lightning, get a free turn, and then switch targets to the Tyrant. So I wanted to save Lightning's LD, but here, because the Centaurion Blade has more than 40,000 Brave, I decided not to risk it and just use Lightning's LD a second time here to mainly to break the Centaurion Blade. Okay, I'm right about to hit the phase 2 here where Tyrant has reached 69% health. So at this stage of the game, if you kill off the Centaurion Blade, Tyrant will immediately resummon the second Centaurion Blade. However, yes, since I focus all my damage on Tyrant, the first Centaurion Blade is still relatively healthy. And so far, it's taken 2 actions, so it's now at a Lufenia orb count of 3. Since I'm in phase 2 now, I decided to bring in the support Immediate Lion. And really, in my opinion, Immediate Lion, if you have as a support unit, is best used in phase 2. Because if you focus on deleting the turns of the Centaurion Blade here, you can then hopefully keep the Centaurion Blade alive as you go into phase 3. So I swap out Kurasame into Immediate Lion. At this point, I don't really need Kurasame anymore because he's done his job of stacking the frame debuff on Tyrant. And I always summon right after I bring in Immediate Lion. So with Immediate Lion in the field, the 5 turns is spent using 3 of Immediate Lion's LD, which deletes both turns on both bosses. And the remaining 2 turns on the support unit is then using Mega Flare on the Centaurion Blade to delete the turns on the Centaurion Blade. This means that with Immediate Lion, you are deleting in total 5 turns of Centaurion Blade, which pushes its turn quite far back, while Lightning keeps the Tyrant delayed through her army of 1+. this stage is very easy. You just need to deal damage on the Tyrant with both Kurasame and Lightning, and try to avoid damaging the Centaurion Blade. With Lightning, you want to refresh her LD once the LD buff has worn off. And you do want to space out her LD use as far away as possible so that she always have her LD buff out for majority of the fight. I'll just quickly fast forward this section because it's just a whole lot of turns of single targeting the Tyrant while their turns are deleted by Immediate Lion. So here you can see a good example that if you kill off the Centaurion Blade at phase 3, the Tyrant will dispel all its debuffs, resummon a new blade, and get a Lufenia orb. And makes the fight more difficult because you lose Kurasame's frame debuff. So you should really just keep the blade alive and finish off the Tyrant monster. that's it. Hope you've enjoyed the video. As always, if you like the content, do leave a like, leave a comment or subscribe. It really helps a lot. Until then, I'll see you in the next Lufenia fight. Bye bye.